Turn off the light.
GHQ की बात कर ही दिया।
Turn off the light. Both. Okay, let's see. This is an assignment which I guess you have already done.
No sir, ये अभी
Yeah. Okay, next. Okay, now we are about to start discussing the operationalization of variables. When we talk about the operationalization, what does that mean? It means how to present the variables to the respondent, to the judges, so that they can provide you the data. That is called the operationalization of variable, or how you are going to collect the data through different items. Explain when operationalization of variable is necessary. How operationalization of variable is necessary. Evaluation is discussion question number 2. Note it down. Example, page number 196. Page number 196. Ji. Evaluation, you will be evaluated by the discussion question number 2. That is on page number something. And the other one is the example, page number 196. Home assignment is 11.2. These are the discussion questions which we might be doing in the class, and this one is the home assignment. Okay? So this is home. And significance is give clear understanding of the variable. So you understand that how to use the variable. Operationalization is how to execute the data collection through it. G, next. So what is the definition of the operationalization? Is reduction of abstract concepts to render them measurable in a tangible way. Note it down. Reduction of abstract concepts. Reduction of abstract concepts to render them measurable. To render them measurable in a tangible way is called operationalizing the concepts. It is called operationalizing the concepts. Okay, when we talk about in a tangible way, tangible means through questionnaire we can collect the data. Okay, so how you can collect the data? Through a tangible way, because the variables are there, and how can you test the variables? How can you test the relationships of variables? So for that you need to operationalize them. Until you operationalize them, you can never measure the variables. And if you cannot measure the variables, then how can you get to know about its magnitude, the relationship magnitude, the relationship direction, that can be negative or positive in either way. So it requires you to collect the data and test. So operationalization is the items and the defining the items, and after that you present to the respondents. So the presentation of the items is also part of the operationalization. We will be discussing in detail. Operationalizing is done by looking at the behavioral dimensions, facets or properties denoted by the concept. This is a very important point. When we talk about the operationalization, we need to say that what is the dimension of the variable. Dimension is very important. When we talk about the dimension means, for example, abuse. So when we use the word variable abuse, so it can be the verbal abuse, it can be the physical abuse, okay? It can be the emotional abuse, okay? So there are many kind of abuse which can be used. So if you are using completely, so not every variable, but most of the variable has dimensions, like motivation, okay? So we have different ways, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. It is also a dimension. Burnout, emotional burnout, physical burnout. So that's how the dimension has to be incorporated in the operationalizing the concepts. There are then translated into observable and measurable elements so as to develop an index of measurement of the concept. What does that mean? It means elements are what? Elements are those which needs to be measured. Okay, I will be giving you example afterwards. G, next. I will be giving you the example of elements. Can you zoom in? So basically this is the response anchors through which you can from here. No, I don't think you cannot. Leave it. Go back. So this is the response format. So in different formats you can collect the response. For example, strongly disagree, strongly disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. Or you can check the beliefs through different ways. You can use the level of chances, like not possible, somehow possible, neutral, somewhat, very possible. So whenever you go with the operationalization of the variables, you can use the different responses accordingly. So it is not necessary that you always use the same response for every item or for every variable. Okay? The different responses are possible, but usually we prefer the one way of response. Like most of the times you have come across the questionnaire which has the same pattern of responses required. For example, strongly disagree, neutral, agree, and strongly agree. Why? Because the respondent does not get confused. So there's a chance, because whenever the choices are different, so it's difficult for the respondent to decipher quickly. Okay, next. Okay, this is a very important point. There are 3 steps which are necessary to operationalize any variable. There are 3 steps. The first step is the definition of the construct. For example, happiness is the construct. Construct and variable are kind of same, but not perfectly, but they are kind of same. So whenever we talk about the construct, it is a concept, and concept is basically a variable. So when we talk about the variable, so you need to define it first. Definition tells you the real understanding of the variable, because through the name of the variable you can never predict about it. It's very difficult, because one variable can be defined in a different manner. For example, beauty, if we take the variable beauty, so beauty can be defined in multiple ways. So what kind of beauty you are talking about? You need to define it explicitly. You need to be very clear about it. If you are not clear, then the respondents and the experts who are checking your questionnaire will be confused. They would not know that what you are talking about, because there is a chance that you have a different definition of beauty and your elements or items are going in a different manner. So it is very important that you define the way you want. Okay. Then it is necessary to think about the content of the measure, that is an instrument or one or more items or questions that actually measure the concept that one wants to measure has to be developed. And if you have a subjective variable, which I already taught you, then the items must be there. Items must be there. Without items, you cannot measure the subjective variable. Do you remember that? We just talked about that there are 2 types of variable. One is the objective, other is the subjective. So when we talk about subjective variable, it must have the items to measure. So if the variable is subjective, then you must have the items to measure it. There are different choices you have. You can adopt the items from any of the previous literature, or you can develop your own. So when you adopt anyone's items, it is called adopted questionnaire or adopted items. And if you want to little change the items which are already in the literature, so that is called adapted. So adapted and adopted, so both are there. Plus you can also create your own items, but it's kind of tricky. It is not easy to develop your own questionnaire. It can give you more citation, but it is very difficult to create because it requires multiple kind of statistical analysis to check it out whether the items you have made are representing the concept or not. And that requires the exploratory factor analysis. You have to explore all the items you have made, that are they representing the same concept or not. It's very, very important. So multiple statistically analysis is important. So if you want to, then you have to go through that. Most probably and most of the time, the questionnaire is adopted and the items are adopted. The reason is because someone has already done the statistical analysis in detail and they have given the reference about it. So we do not have to reinvent the wheel, so we can make our own. Yes, if you are going to test or going to get the data of a particular variable which is new to the industry, to the body of knowledge, to the literature, so you can go for it. Okay? Otherwise, if the variable is already being used by the many researcher, then there is no need for that. And it will not even count your contribution actually, because anyone can argue what is your contribution, it is already there. Why have you done the same thing without any reason, and your answer is almost same? So it can be challenged. Anyway, the last one is a response format, which I just showed you, the strongly disagree. This is called the response format. So response format is a very important, because the response format would allow the judge to give you data. If the response format is not up to the mark, then your data cannot give you a real picture. So you need to have the proper response format. Okay? This is very, very important. So there are different kind of response format which I just showed you. I recommend you go whenever you go to home. So you have to read the last slide, which has the details of the response format. Okay? So what are the 3 steps anyone would tell me of the operationalization of the concept? Operationalizing the concept, what are the 3 steps? G.
So define in a proper way variable. Second, know that it is a subjective variable or objective variable. To know कि हमें कितने उसमें आइटम्स क्रिएट करने हैं अपनी डिटेल, और थर्ड ये कि हमें फॉर्मेट जो है रिस्पॉन्स का वो क्रिएट करना है प्रॉपर वे में, जिससे हमें सही.
What about the items? You did not define. You said only subjective and objective, but you did not define. If the variable is subjective, then how we are going to have the items?
Sir, if we have a subjective variable, उसके अंदर हमें फिर variables वो items जो होते हैं उनको ज़्यादा रखने पड़ते हैं ताकि हमें clearly answer मिल पाए.
That is true.
Feelings
That is true, but how do you get the items? I mentioned in my lecture. You are missing the point. Very good. Excellent. She has got the complete point of mine. I mentioned these same concept which she just explained. Okay. Any questions so far? Next. Okay, need for cognition is on page number 196. So we are going to discuss about it. Next. Okay, I need to move ahead. Move ahead. Okay. Turn it. Let me show you need for cognition. The variable it is. Okay. This is the need for cognition or achievement motivation it is. Okay, anyway. these are the concepts which we discussed. These are the concepts which we discussed, already discussed. Skip. Abstract concept and the objective concept. Okay, we already discussed. Abstract variable and objective variable. Next. Items can be many. Items can be many. It can be 4 or it can be more than 50 even. So it depends upon the concept it is, the variable it is. Next. This is your home assignment. Why do we need 34 items to measure need for cognition? Why do 3 or 4 items not suffice? Okay? Let me tell you briefly about it. It is highly recommended that you include all the dimensions of any variable. Because if you do not include, you do not get the proper data about it. Like I already mentioned about the motivation. If I do not ask you about the intrinsic motivation questions, then how can you measure the motivation completely? So when you measure the concept comprehensively, completely, then you need to include all the dimensions. So this is very, very important. So that is what is written, what is being asked, that are the 4 items are enough, or do we need to include more, 34 items? So you need to tell. Its answer is because we are interested in the complete display of the variable items to get the proper testing, to get the proper relationship between the variables. Okay? Next. Okay, now we are moving ahead towards the abstract variable, detailed concept, and we will be defining about it. Next. Okay, I already gave you the example about the aggression, verbal and the physical aggression. So whenever we talk about the aggression variable, whenever we want to measure the aggression variable, we cannot measure by a single dimension only. So every dimension has few elements, or every subjective variable has few elements. Okay? All the elements must include for measuring any variable. Very, very important. I am repeating myself. Every subjective variable has 1 or more elements. Note it down. Every subjective variable has 1 or more element. Has 1 or more element. Every subjective variable has 1 or more element. 1 or more element. उसके बाद लिखें few variables have dimensions. Few subjective variables या few subjective variables has dimension. Few subjective variables has dimensions. Few subjective variables have dimensions. तो ये हमें समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है. And we need to include all the dimensions. So that is the comprehensive measurement. For example, if I say motivation positively impacts the performance, and if I have not measured the motivation the way I should be by including all the dimensions, it means my testing can have some kind of lacking. It requires more effort actually. So it is highly recommended that you include all the dimensions so that you can develop or you can test your hypothesis properly, completely. Next. So you see burnout, we already discussed emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and personal accomplishment. Reduced personal accomplishment. So when the 3 things are there, so we call it burnout. Otherwise, we can never call it burnout. So burnout requires you to measure all the 3 dimensions. Next. When we talk about the wellness is a very important concept. It's a buzzword nowadays, especially when we talk about the health of employees. So when we talk about the wellness, we talk about all the dimensions of the wellness. For example, environmental wellness, financial wellness, intellectual wellness, occupational wellness, physical, social, spiritual, and emotional. So when you say that I am taking care of the wellness of my employees, it means all the dimensions has to be measured. If all the dimensions are not measured, you can never say about the well-being of your employees. You can not say. So they can be financially well, but not the other dimension, like physical wellness and emotional wellness, social wellness. There are multiple wellness which cannot be predicted by the financial assistance only. This is very, very important. So have you understood the idea? Okay, whenever we need to measure the variable, any abstract variable, so we need to look at all the dimensions. If we do not look at all the dimensions, we measure the variable incompletely. When you measure the variable incompletely, you can never test the hypothesis. You can never say that my prediction about the relationship is 100% up to the mark. It's a compromised testing. It is a compromised result, actually. Next. So you see, when we talk about the achievement motivation is one of the abstract variable. So now you need to focus over here. The backbenchers, please focus over here. Achievement motivation is one of the variable, and it has the 5 dimensions. It has 5 dimensions. And when we say 5 dimensions, it means every dimension may have multiple elements. ठीक है? And every element can have one item or multiple items. I'm repeating myself. Any subjective variable may have multiple dimensions. Any subjective variable may have multiple dimensions, and every dimension may have multiple elements, and every element may have multiple items. ठीक है? So this is a basically tree. सबसे पहले every subjective variable has multiple dimensions. Every subjective variable has multiple dimensions. You don't like to write? No, you have to write so that you remember. When you see with your eyes, when you listen to your ears, then you can easily recall. Okay, so when you define the subjective variable, there may be the dimensions which you need to take care of. Then every dimension may have multiple elements, and every element may have multiple items. So this is a chain of concepts. ठीक है. Every variable may have multiple dimensions, and every dimension may have multiple elements. Every dimension may have multiple elements, and every element may have multiple atoms. ठीक है? Very, very important concept. So what does it mean? It means if a variable does not have multiple dimension, but a variable may have multiple elements, and the elements may have multiple items. ये बात याद रखिए. Very, very important. Because I talked about the variable, subjective variable. I did not say that only variable which has dimension may have. I said every subjective variable may have dimension, and every dimension may have multiple elements. Multiple elements. One element must be there, but may have multiple elements. And every element may have multiple atoms. This is very, very important. So that's how you operationalize the variable. So it seems pretty easy, but actually it requires a lot of deliberation of yours. Because so that you can operationalize the variable, it should be. If you are really interested in understanding the relationship between the variables, then you need to operationalize the way the variable should be. Very important. Next. Any questions so far? I need you to study the same concept, achievement, motivation, in your book right now. When I ask question, if you have any.